You have failed. Maybe once, maybe many times. And every time it happened, something inside you got smaller. Something inside you said, I am not good enough. Maybe this is just who I am. But what if that voice was wrong? What if failure was never the end of your story? What if it was the beginning of something stronger, something deeper, something that most people never find because they run away too fast? 2,000 years ago, a group of thinkers in ancient Greece and Rome asked that same question. They were called the Stoics, and the answer they found was not comfortable. It was not easy, but it was powerful. It changed the way they lived, the way they led, and the way they faced the hardest moments of their lives. This is a graded lesson for English learners who want a stronger mind. Today, that answer belongs to you. Here is what you need to know before we begin. The Stoics did not avoid failure. They did not pretend it did not hurt. They did not smile and say everything is fine. They felt the pain. They looked at it directly. And then they did something that most people never do. They used it. Every loss, every mistake, every moment of shame or defeat. They picked it up like a stone, and they built something with it. Because the Stoics believed one thing with their whole heart. The obstacle is the way, not around the obstacle, not away from it, through it. The thing that is blocking you is also the thing that is building you. That is the idea at the center of today's lesson. And by the time we finish, you will never look at failure the same way again. In this lesson, you will learn 7 things. You will learn what the Stoics truly believed about failure and why it is different from what the world tells you. You will learn about a man who was born a slave and still became one of the greatest minds in history. You will learn about the most powerful emperor in the world and the private journal he kept for no one but himself. You will learn how to make peace with your worst fears before they arrive. And you will learn the daily practice that turns an ordinary mind into something unbreakable. This is not a philosophy lecture. This is a lesson for your life. Right now. Today. Stay with this. Don't move. Because what you are about to hear, most people spend their whole lives never understanding. If you are serious about building a mind that does not break, subscribe right now. There is much more coming. Let's begin. Lesson 1. What the Stoics really believed about failure. Here's the truth. The world teaches you to fear failure. From the time you are a child, failure means something is wrong with you. You failed the test. You failed the interview. You failed the relationship. And slowly, without knowing it, you start to believe that failure is the opposite of success. The Stoics believed something completely different. To a Stoic, failure was not the opposite of success. Failure was part of success. It was the price you paid, the fire you walked through. Not a sign that you were going the wrong way, but proof that you were going somewhere at all. Think about that for a moment. Most people ask, why me, when something goes wrong? Why did I lose this job? Why did this relationship end? Why did this happen to me? The Stoic asks a different question. What now? Not why. What now? That single shift changes everything. Because why me keeps you looking backward. It keeps you stuck in the pain, turning it over and over in your hands, trying to understand something that may never make sense. But what now moves you forward. It puts the power back in your hands. It says, I cannot change what happened, but I can choose what I do next. This was not just an idea the Stoics wrote about. It was something they practiced every day, in small moments and in enormous ones. Marcus Aurelius was the emperor of Rome. At the height of his power, he commanded the largest empire in the world. And yet his life was filled with loss. His children died. His army faced plague. His borders were attacked from every direction. And through all of it, Marcus Aurelius kept writing. Not speeches for the public, not letters to his generals. He wrote private notes to himself, reminders, corrections, small, quiet instructions for how to think, how to respond, how to stay human under impossible pressure. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He did not write this because things were easy. He wrote this because things were hard. And he needed to remind himself again and again that his mind was always his own. Carol Dweck, a researcher who spent decades studying how people respond to failure, found something remarkable. People who believe their abilities can grow, who see failure as information rather than identity, those people recover faster. They try harder. They go further. She called it the growth mindset. The Stoics had a name for it too. They called it amor fati, love of fate. Not just accepting what happens, loving it. Because it is making you. Don't just accept your failure. Don't just survive it. Love it. It is building something in you that comfort never could. Most people look at a setback and see a wall. The Stoic looks at the same wall and sees a staircase. The material is the same. The difference is the mind looking at it. Strong people are not people who never fall. They are people who fall and ask, "What now?" before they even hit the ground. Lesson 2. The man who lost everything and still won. There was a man born with nothing, less than nothing. He was born into slavery in ancient Rome in a city called Hierapolis. His name was Epictetus, and from the very first day of his life, he had no freedom, no rights, no choice about where he went or what he did. He belonged to someone else. His master was a man known for cruelty. One day, to test him, or perhaps simply because he could, the master grabbed Epictetus by the leg and began to twist it. Those watching said that Epictetus spoke calmly. He said, "You are going to break it." The master twisted harder. Epictetus said, "I told you so." And the bone broke. He did not scream. He did not beg. He felt the pain, of course he did. But something inside him was completely still. "Stay with me, because this is important." Most people hear that story and think, that is not normal. That is not human. But Epictetus was not pretending the pain did not exist. He was not blocking it out. He had simply understood something that took him years to learn. Something that changed the entire shape of his life. He understood that there are two kinds of things in this world. Things inside your control and things outside your control. His leg was outside his control. His master's cruelty was outside his control. But his response, his thoughts, his values, his inner life, those were entirely his own. No one could touch them. Not his master, not the pain, not the broken bone. He wrote, "Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things. If X happens to you, that is outside your control. If Y breaks around you, that is outside your control. If Z is taken from you, if the ground disappears under your feet, if the plan falls apart completely, none of that can touch the one thing that is truly yours. Your response. Your mind. Your next choice." Epictetus was eventually freed. He went on to become one of the most respected teachers in all of Rome. Emperors and senators came to hear him speak. The man who was once someone's property became someone whose words outlasted entire empires. But here is what makes his story more than just a historical fact. What Epictetus lived, modern science is now beginning to explain. When you face difficulty and push through it, when you sit with pain instead of running, Your brain physically changes. New connections form. Old patterns break apart and rebuild stronger. Researchers call this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself in response to challenge. Difficulty is not just a mental experience. It is a biological one. Failure literally builds new pathways in your mind. This is why people who have survived great hardship so often speak with a kind of calm authority. Not because the hardship was good, but because it changed them at a level deeper than thought. If you have ever lost something important, you know this feeling. There is a version of you before the loss, and a different version after. Quieter, maybe. Heavier in some ways, but also more real, more honest, less afraid of small things. Epictetus lost the use of his leg. He gained the use of his whole life. The question is never what was taken from you. The question is always what you build with what remains. Lesson 3. You cannot control the storm, only the sail. Let me ask you something honest. Think about the last time something went wrong in your life, something real. A job you lost, a plan that failed, a person who left, a door that closed. When it happened, where did your mind go first? Most people go to the same place. They go to blame. They blame the situation. They blame the other person. They blame bad luck, bad timing, bad circumstances. Or they turn it inward and they blame themselves. Over and over. Replaying the moment. Asking what they should have done differently. Carrying the weight of something they can no longer change. Now think about this. All of that energy, every hour you spent in blame, every night you lost to what if and if only. Did any of it change what happened? Did it fix anything? Did it move you forward even one step? It did not. The Stoics identified this trap 2,000 years ago. They called it the dichotomy of control, a simple idea, powerful enough to reshape an entire life. There are things inside your control, and there are things outside your control. That is the whole division, nothing else. Inside your control, your thoughts, your effort, your attitude, your response, your values, the work you put in today. Outside your control, other people's choices, the economy, the weather, what happened yesterday, what someone else decides. The result of your effort. He woke up one morning and his job was gone. He worked, he built, he gave years, and then it was taken, just like that. This is a man, we can call him David, an engineer in his early 40s. He had spent 15 years building his career at the same company. Then one morning, a meeting. 10 minutes, and it was over. He drove home and sat in his car in the driveway for a long time. Not crying, not angry, just sitting. And something strange happened. He started asking himself one question over and over. Not, why did this happen? Not, what did I do wrong? Just one question. What is actually mine right now? His skills were his. His knowledge was his. His reputation with the people who knew his work was his. His ability to start again was his. The job was gone. But everything that made him good at the job, that was still there, untouched. He did not waste months in anger. He did not spend weeks rebuilding his story into something where he was the victim. He took what was his, and he moved. 6 months later, he was working at a better company doing more interesting work for more money. 3 years after that, he was mentoring younger engineers, telling them the same thing he had learned sitting in that driveway. You cannot control the storm. You can only control the sail. Weak mind runs from failure. Strong mind sits with it and learns. This is not a soft idea. This is not positive thinking with a new name. This is a discipline. It takes practice. It takes honesty. Because the first thing a human being wants to do when something hurts is to make it someone else's fault, or to collapse entirely. Neither of those is the Stoic response. He stopped. He assessed. He separated what was his from what was not. And then he moved. You can do exactly the same thing, right now, with whatever you are carrying. Ask yourself the question David asked. What is actually mine right now? Your energy is yours. Your next hour is yours. Your decision about how to spend tomorrow morning is yours. Start there. Build from there. Everything else is weather. Lesson 4. How to make peace with your worst fear. Most people spend their lives running from one thing, not failure itself, the thought of failure, the image of it. The moment they imagine losing, they turn away. They distract themselves. They stay busy. They keep moving so the fear never catches up. But it always catches up. The Stoics had a practice for this. They called it premeditatio malorum. In simple English, the premeditation of bad things. Before something important happened, a Stoic would sit quietly and imagine everything that could go wrong. Not to scare themselves, not to become negative, but to take away the fear's power before it arrived. Listen carefully. This is not pessimism. This is preparation. When you imagine the worst, clearly something interesting happens. The fear loses its shape. It stops being a dark cloud at the edge of your mind and becomes something specific, something you can look at, something you can plan for, and something you can survive. There was a young woman named Sarah. She was studying to become a nurse. She had taken her licensing exam twice and failed both times. The third attempt was coming and she was terrified, not just of failing again, of what failing again would mean, that she was not smart enough, that she had made the wrong choice, that she had wasted years of her life. A mentor suggested she try something uncomfortable. Sit down, the mentor said, and write out exactly what happens if you fail again. Not in general, in detail. You fail the exam. What happens next? You wait and register again. What happens after that? You study differently, you ask for help, you try once more, and if you fail again, you keep going. Step by step. She followed every fear to its end. And at the end of every path, she was still standing. Tired, maybe. Disappointed, yes. But standing. She sat with that image. She let it be real. And then something shifted. The fear did not disappear, but it became smaller. Because she had already met it. She had already survived it in her mind. She passed the exam on her fourth attempt. Not because the fear was gone, because the fear no longer controlled her. She had looked at her worst case and decided even that I can handle. This is what premeditatio malorum gives you. Not certainty, not a guarantee. It gives you a relationship with difficulty before difficulty arrives. The Stoic does not fear failure. He has already met it in his mind. Average people fear losing. Disciplined people fear not trying. You are not afraid of failure. You are afraid of what failure means. You are afraid of what people will think, afraid of wasted effort, afraid of feeling like you were not enough. But those are stories. They are not facts. And a Stoic knows the difference between a story and a fact. The fact is, you tried. The fact is, it did not work this time. The fact is, you are still here. Everything else is a story you are telling yourself, and you can choose a different one. Being prepared is not the same as being afraid. Being ready for the hard thing does not mean you are expecting to fail. It means that when difficulty comes, and it will come, you are not surprised. You are not crushed. You have already stood in that place in your mind, and you know what to do. The obstacle is the way. If this lesson is speaking to you, if you feel something shifting inside right now, subscribe and stay with this channel. There is more coming. Real lessons. No shortcuts. Just the kind of thinking that actually changes a life. Lesson 5. The people who used suffering as fuel. There are people in this world who have been through things that most of us cannot imagine. Real darkness, real loss. The kind of pain that does not go away with time or with talking. And some of those people came out the other side not just surviving, but transformed. Not despite what they suffered, because of it. I want to tell you about 2 of them. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist. In 1942, he and his entire family were taken by the Nazis and put into concentration camps. His wife was killed. His parents were killed. He lost nearly everything and nearly everyone he had ever loved. He lived for 3 years in conditions that were designed to destroy a person completely. And in those camps, watching people around him give up and die, watching others find reasons to keep going, he noticed something. He noticed that the people who survived longest were not always the strongest physically. They were the ones who had found a reason, a purpose, something that gave meaning to the suffering. Even in the worst place on earth, the human mind was searching for meaning. And when it found meaning even in pain, it kept going. Frankl survived. After the war, he built an entire school of psychology from what he had witnessed and lived. He called it logotherapy. The idea at its center was simple but enormous. You cannot always choose what happens to you, but you can always choose the meaning you give it. If your suffering has a purpose, it becomes fuel. If it has no purpose, it becomes poison. If you have lost something and you ask what it taught you, that is Frankl's lesson. If you have failed and you ask how it made you better, that is Frankl's lesson. If you have been through something hard and you refuse to let it be wasted, refuse to let it mean nothing, that is Frankl's lesson. Now hear me on this. Because some people hear Viktor Frankl's story and they say that was an extraordinary situation. I cannot compare my problems to that. But that is exactly the wrong response. Frankl's lesson was not about the size of the suffering. It was about the response to suffering. Any suffering. Your suffering. The frustration of a failed business, the pain of a broken relationship, the shame of a public mistake. The size does not matter. The meaning you choose does. David Goggins grew up in a home filled with violence. His father beat him and his mother regularly. He grew up poor, overweight, struggling in school. As a young man, he was working a night job spraying cockroaches in restaurants, dreaming of something different but not knowing how to reach it. He applied for the Navy SEALs and failed. He applied again and failed again. He applied a 3rd time. He made it. And then he went further. Ultramarathons, world records. He pushed his body and mind past every limit he had ever thought was real. Not because he enjoyed pain, but because he had decided that pain was the material. The raw material from which he would build something no one could take from him. He said once that most people quit at 40%. 40% of what they are actually capable of. The other 60% is still there, waiting, locked behind the door that discomfort guards. Quitters blame the obstacle. Winners become the obstacle. Frankl chose meaning. Goggins chose movement. Different paths. The same Stoic truth underneath both of them. Pain is not the enemy. Wasted pain is. The obstacle is the way. You have felt pain. You have failed at something. You have lost something. That is not the question. The question is, what are you doing with it? Is it becoming fuel, or is it becoming a reason to stop? The Stoics would not accept the second answer, and neither should you. Lesson 6. The Emperor Who Wrote to Himself. Picture the most powerful man in the world. He commands armies. He controls borders that stretch across 3 continents. Millions of people live and die by his decisions. Senators wait for his words. Generals follow his orders. He is untouchable. And every night alone, he writes in a small journal. He writes things like, "You have done wrong. Do better tomorrow." He writes, "Stop complaining. Everyone suffers." He writes, "You are not as important as you think." This was Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, the most powerful man of his age. And he spent decades writing private notes to himself that were never meant to be read by anyone else. Not instructions for his empire, not wisdom for his generals. Just a man talking honestly to himself, trying to be better than he was yesterday. We call that journal the Meditations today. It is one of the most widely read books in the world 2,000 years after it was written. But Marcus never called it that. He had no title for it. It was just his practice, his daily conversation with his own character. Let me make this simple. Marcus Aurelius did not write the Meditations because he had already figured everything out. He wrote it because he had not. He was a man in progress, an emperor who lost battles, who was surrounded by people who flattered him instead of telling him the truth, who faced grief and plague and war, sometimes all at once, and who knew with complete honesty that he could always be better. He believed one thing above all others, that virtue was the only real success, not winning, not being admired, not being remembered. Virtue. Doing the right thing in the right way regardless of the outcome. He wrote about failure not as something to hide, but as something to study. He lost military campaigns. He made decisions that cost lives. He trusted people who betrayed him. And after each of those things, he went back to his journal and he asked himself the same question. Did I act with virtue? Did I do what was right with the knowledge I had in the way I believed was correct? If the answer was yes, then the outcome, however painful, was something he could carry. If the answer was no, then he corrected himself and moved forward. He wrote. He reflected. He corrected. He moved on. He woke up the next day and started again. This is the Stoic relationship with failure. It is not emotional. It is not dramatic. It is honest and practical and relentless. Not did I win, but did I act well? Not did people approve, but did I do what was right? You can lose the battle and still win the war inside yourself. That is not a consolation prize. That is the real prize. The only one that is entirely yours. Most people measure their lives by outcomes, promotions, numbers, other people's opinions, applause. Marcus Aurelius measured his life by a different standard. And because of that, no single failure could define him. No single loss could break him. Because the standard was always internal, always his, always within his control. Think about how that changes things. If your measure of success is something outside you, then every failure is a verdict. Every loss is a judgment. But if your measure is internal, if you ask only, did I do my best with what I had, then failure becomes feedback, not a verdict, just information, just the next thing to learn from. He sat with his failures. He named them. He studied them. He let them teach him. And then he got up and served his empire again. That is not weakness. That is the hardest kind of strength there is. Lesson 7. The daily practice that builds an unbreakable mind. Everything we have talked about today, every idea, every story, every principle, it means nothing if it stays in your head. Stoicism was never meant to be read. It was meant to be lived. Marcus Aurelius did not write the Meditations so that people 2,000 years later could quote it on the internet. He wrote it because he needed to practice. Every single day. Not once a week. Not when things got hard. Every day, whether things were easy or difficult, whether he felt like it or not. That is the part most people miss. Here's what most people miss about Stoic philosophy. They think it is something you understand and then you have it. Like finishing a book. Like completing a course. They read about Epictetus and they feel inspired. They read about Marcus Aurelius and they feel motivated. And then life happens. The difficult email arrives. The plan falls apart. The person disappoints them. And everything they read disappears. Because inspiration is not practice. Understanding is not habit. Feeling moved is not the same as being changed. The Stoics built a daily practice because they knew this. They knew that the mind is not changed by a single insight. It is changed by repetition. By returning to the same ideas again and again in small moments, in ordinary moments, until those ideas become reflexes. Until your first response to difficulty is not panic or blame, but the quiet question, what is actually mine here? What can I do? Consumers read about Stoicism. Builders live it. Every single day. The practice is simple. Not easy. Simple. In the morning, before the day takes over, you sit for a few minutes and you think about what is ahead. Not with anxiety, with honesty. What might go wrong today? How will I respond if it does? What do I want to bring to this day regardless of what happens? This is premeditatio malorum in its daily form. Small, quiet, powerful. In the evening, you review. Not to judge yourself, to learn. What did I do well? Where did I lose my calm? Where did I give my attention to something outside my control? What will I do differently tomorrow? Marcus Aurelius did this every night of his adult life. The most powerful man in the world, sitting alone, holding himself to account. You can do this in 5 minutes. You do not need a journal. You do not need a special practice. You need honesty and repetition. That is all. And slowly, something changes. Not quickly, not dramatically. Slowly. The way a river cuts through rock. Not by force, by consistency. You stop reacting so fast. You stop taking small things personally. You stop spending energy on things you cannot change. Not because you have become cold, because you have become clear. You know what is yours. You know what is not. And you spend your energy only on what is actually yours. The Stoics called this the inner citadel, the fortress of the mind. Built not from stone, but from practice, from daily choice. From the small decision made again and again to respond rather than react. To think before you speak. To pause before you act. To ask what is true before you decide what to feel. They can take your job. They can take your money. They can take your reputation, your comfort, your plans, your certainty about the future. They cannot take your mind. Not if you have built it. Not if you have practiced. Not if you have chosen day after day to keep it yours. The obstacle is the way, not just in the big moments, in the small ones. The morning when you do not want to get up. The meeting that frustrates you. The message that stings. The plan that changes without warning. Every single one of those moments is practice. Every single one is a chance to use what you know. You are not building a philosophy. You are building a mind. And a mind built this way does not break. It bends. It absorbs. It adapts. And it keeps going. We have come a long way today. We started with a simple question. What if failure was not the end? What if it was something else entirely? And over the course of this lesson, 7 ideas showed us the answer. Lesson 1. The Stoics did not see failure as a verdict. They saw it as a lesson written in fire. Not the opposite of success, part of it. Lesson 2. Epictetus was born with nothing and built everything from the inside out. He showed us that the mind is the one possession no one can take. What happens to your body, your circumstances, your plans, none of that touches the citadel inside you, unless you let it. Lesson 3. David the engineer in the driveway showed us that the dichotomy of control is not just a philosophy, it is a daily tool. Separate what is yours from what is not. Then pour everything into what is yours. Lesson 4. Sarah showed us that premeditatio malorum is not fear. It is preparation. Meet your worst case in your mind before it arrives. Take away its power. Then move. Lesson 5. Viktor Frankl and David Goggins showed us that pain without meaning becomes poison. Pain with meaning becomes fuel. You choose the meaning, always. Lesson 6. Marcus Aurelius showed us that virtue is the only outcome entirely within your control. You can lose the game and still win. If you acted well, if you showed up honestly, if you did the right thing with what you had. Lesson 7. Stoicism is not something you read and then possess. It is something you practice. Every morning, every evening, in the small moments and the large ones. Until the question, what is mine here, becomes your first instinct, not your last resort. You woke up. You listened. You stayed. That matters. Now the real work begins. Not the listening, the living. Take one of these ideas, just one, and carry it into tomorrow. When something goes wrong, and something will, pause. Ask the question. Separate what is yours. Choose your response. That is the whole practice. Small, daily, cumulative, unstoppable. Failure did not break you. It built you. Now go prove it. The obstacle is the way. What is the setback you are turning into fuel right now? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. If this lesson reached you, share it with someone who needs it. And subscribe if you want more lessons like this one. Real ideas. Clear English. No shortcuts. Keep listening daily. Your English grows with your mind. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep going.